Hey guys, another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist. Interesting how one video will often lead to another. Specifically, comments under videos will often lead to another. So in this case, some of you might have seen the video we made recently talking about moving to Japan. There was a comment underneath that video. There are lots of comments underneath that video, lots of them. I read them all, I read every comment. One of the comments was from someone who said, I'm about to move to Japan with my Japanese wife. And when I saw that, I got really tempted to respond to it, and then I decided that there was nothing I could really contribute, so I didn't say anything. But one of our regulars, who's a foreign guy who lives in Japan with his Japanese wife, he did comment, and he said, it's all about to begin for you, or something similar to that. It's about to begin for you, it's about to start for you. To which our friend responded by saying, we've been married for 6 years, it's all good, we've been to Japan a few times, it's all good, sort of thing. I'm paraphrasing, I am paraphrasing. Now that triggered me then, because I was like, right, so, in the hope of helping our friend, giving him a bit of a heads up with what he might expect when he comes here, that's what this video is about. Also, if there's one other person that this video helps, then it was worth making as well. So, obviously, living in a multicultural society like America or Australia or England or a lot of other European countries, a multicultural society with your Japanese wife, or living in Japan with your Japanese wife or husband, partner, Japanese partner I will say, the dynamic could be very different. It could change. Now obviously everybody's different, people are different from each other, and relationships are different. However, there are some things that I've observed to be quite common. So a couple of those might be, first of all, that when you live in Japan, how society treats your relationship. So a couple of things that come to mind is, one is, it's not uncommon, people come to the door of our house and I'll come out and go, konnichiwa, and they'll say, I'm here to collect money for the festival or something, and I'll give them the money and it's all good. However, occasionally someone will come to the door and say, is wife here? Right? Japanese people say it. They will come to the door and say, is husband here as well, but they'll come to the door and say, is wife here? Because they'd prefer to deal with the Japanese person. Now, it's not always the case, but sometimes it happens that they come to the door. Now, obviously in Australia, if I answer the door, I'll deal with whatever it is. But in Japan, sometimes they prefer to deal with the Japanese person, and they'll ask for wife. Is wife here? Okusan imasu ka? Yeah, prefer to deal with wife. And that's fair enough. The other thing that obviously happens is occasionally there's a phone call that's just a bit too deep for me. It does happen. It does happen. If it's something simple that's common that I've dealt with before, usually not a problem, but phone is difficult. And I get a phone call sometimes and it's blah 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 blah, and I'm not quite keeping up with it, and I'll go chotomate kudasai, and I'll hand it over to wife. Right, that wife husband thing is a Japanese cultural thing. They do that. So I'll say, just a moment please, and I'll hand it over to the wife, and she'll deal with it, because it's just a little bit too much. They're talking a bit too quickly about something I know nothing about, and I'm a bit out of my depth, and I'll just hand it over to her. Now in Australia I don't have to do that, right? So my point is that these sorts of things can change the dynamic of your relationship a little bit. You know, mail turns up, usually I understand what it's about, but occasionally I'm a bit out of my depth, and I'll hand it over to her and say, what's this about? I don't understand this one. So that little things like that can change the nature of your relationship. Also, that's how you as a couple relate to the society around you. But also, what can happen is it can change the relationship between the two of you, right? Because what is normal in your home country and for relationships, and what is normal in Japanese society for relationships can be very different. Now, we've talked about a few examples of this on previous videos. People reacted quite strongly to some of them. One of them is, for example, just asking your partner where they've been. Years ago, my wife had a school reunion, and she came home at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? And some of you guys you know, would think, okay, quite reasonable to say, hey, 5 o'clock in the morning, where have you been, right? But it's not real cool here, usually. Now, again, there's exceptions to all this, but usually in Japan, you know, you should say, oh, did you have a good time? Good, that's great. Ask no more questions, right? And not always, but usually that's considered to be the norm in Japan. Her friends and the other people that she knows, their partners don't ask them where they've been and what they've been doing. So if you do it in Japan, if you're living in Japan and you do it, you may be seen as being very not cool, right? So I mean, these are just examples. Another one is obviously, you know, in your country, you might be walking around with your wife holding hands, or you might be, you know, sitting there, arms around each other somewhere, or, you know, someone says something about your wife and you might go, oh, I love her, she's the most wonderful person, and she's, you know, and she'll say, oh yes, my husband's a wonderful, wonderful guy. Then you come to Japan and someone says to your wife, oh geez, your husband's really cool, and she says, nah, he's not, he's annoying. Right? They do it. Right? And the first time I heard that, I was like, what the, you know, he's really annoying. And it's because in Japan, being affectionate in public is sort of seen as a bit sort of desperate and not cool and a bit embarrassing for other people, and so people usually don't do it. Now, there are exceptions to this, but usually touching each other in public or showing affection to each other in public is not cool. So if you're used to that because you've lived together in another country for 6 years, suddenly you come here, you shouldn't do it here usually, because it's sort of considered to be not cool, and it sort of looks, they sort of think it looks a bit desperate. Why are they all over each other like that? That's a bit gross. That's often the way they see it. If someone says something nice about your partner here, usually you play it down because it's modesty. So if someone says, geez, your car's really cool, you go, oh, it's an old car. Or if someone says, geez, your husband's really cool, you go, oh, he's annoying, you know. Geez, your wife's, oh, here's another one. Guys will tell you that your wife is very cute, right? The first time you hear that, it's like, what are you talking about, dude? But it's really common here that girls will tell women that their husbands are cool, and guys will tell husbands that their wives are cute, right? So you'll be told that your partner's cool or your partner's cute, and the right response to that is, yeah, they're all right, and play it down, right? It doesn't mean anything. It's just a compliment. It's possibly true or possibly not true, right? So the point is, there's all these examples. My Australian friend here was married to his Japanese wife, and she was pretty cool. She spoke English really well, and she'd spent a lot of time outside Japan, and she sort of understood other cultures pretty well. But one day he was doing something that wasn't cool in Japan, and she got really angry at him and said to him, "You should be Japanese." Right? Now, because she was angry, it was a really interesting little insight into her real thinking or her real feeling. That was her frustration, that we're living in Japan and that he should be Japanese. Not just that he should act Japanese, he should be Japanese, right? Now, it was a really good one because it was really like a moment of honesty from her. But usually she's pretty cool about other cultures and things, but the reality is, because she's in Japan, because they live in Japan, she expects her husband to behave in a Japanese way, right? And this is what happens, right? This is what happens. So the dynamic of the relationship that you have with your Japanese partner is likely to be different. Now, maybe it's different in a small way, or maybe it's different in a big way, but it's sure to be different in some way, which is why our friend left that comment on that other guy's comment, saying it's about to be all new for you, or something like that, he said. It's about to start for you. Because even though they've been married for 6 years already, once they come here, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be really different. So the reason for this video is a heads up video for our friend that's been married for 6 years to a Japanese lady. He said they've visited Japan a few times and it was all good. But as mentioned in that other video previously, visiting Japan and living in Japan and the expectations on you are totally different. So for sure, for sure. And that's what the reason for this video is. It's a heads up video for our friend, because if you know these things are coming, it will help you deal with them better. I'm sure of that, you know, because all these things that I've experienced over the years where I had no warning, it's like, you think it's just that person. You think it's suddenly your partner's changed. She's changed. She used to be really cool, now she's not. You know, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is not her. It's the normal has changed. What's normal has changed. In your country, holding hands in public, telling everybody that your wife was wonderful, all that sort of stuff was normal in your country. In Japan, that's not normal. So that's why she's not doing it. And I think if we stay aware of the fact, because quite often it's like, what's wrong with this woman, you know, or this man, depending on the relationship. What's wrong with this person? What's wrong with this person? But why is he doing that? Why is she doing that? But in actual fact, it's not that person's thing. Is that person doing or saying, is that normal in Japan? If it is, it's not their problem, is it? It's not their problem. It's not their doing. They're doing or saying what's normal in Japan. Telling people that you're not cool is normal in Japan. She's being modest. She's being modest. She's playing it down. It doesn't mean that's her real thinking or his real thinking. They're just playing it down because that's what you do in Japan. If someone gives you a compliment, you go, oh, no, he's not cool. She's not cute. She's annoying. That's what they do. That's what they do. They don't say proudly that my wife's the most wonderful woman in the world. They don't do that here. You know, my husband's the coolest guy. He's wonderful. I love him. They don't do that here. The public usually, or the public displays of affection, all that sort of stuff. They don't do that here. So your relationship, the dynamic of your relationship is sure to be different. Sure to be different. Even in short periods of time, when I visited Australia with my wife, even during that short periods, a couple of weeks, it's different. Because in Australia, she doesn't know how to do much, and I do, right? So suddenly she's really dependent on me to help her with just about everything, you know, menus and just everything that we do, you know. So the dynamic of the relationship changes even just during that couple of weeks, and that's only for a visit. That's not living there, you know. In actual fact, my wife used to talk about living in Australia, and then after we'd spent a couple of weeks there, we came back and she said to me, yeah, I think I can see now why, because I always said to her she wouldn't like to live there, and after we'd spent a couple of weeks there, once we came back, and we've been a few times, and once when we came back, she said, I can see what you're talking about now. I don't think I could live there, because she could see the difference, you know. So it's different. I mean, it's different, as we talked about in that video recently. Our life is different if we live in another country or we live in Japan. But if we're in a relationship, our relationship is bound to be different as well, you know. And if you take your Japanese partner and move back to your country, you know, when you're living in Japan as a foreigner, your partner sees you as a foreigner in Japan as being a little bit different, a little bit exotic from everybody else around you, usually. Now you take that partner and you move back to your country, suddenly there's another dozen people in your life just like you, right, or similar to you, where you're not so different and exotic anymore. And then they have to leave their family and friends and come live there with you. That's the other thing. Whenever you do this relationship thing with someone from another country, one of you has to give up your friends and family to go and live in this other country, you know, and you do. Those of you who have moved to other countries, you do. You know, some friends and family will keep in contact with you and you maintain your relationship, but a lot of them won't. You know, when you're out of sight, out of mind, quite often, you know, some people will just forget about you, you know, and you don't have your friends and family around you anymore. So one of you is going to have to give up your friends and family and your culture and your language to go live in the other country. You know, it's a huge thing. It's a really huge thing. That's why the reality is that usually these relationships don't work. Not to say they can't. I mean, I'm very happy in a relationship I'm in. It's taken a lot of work to make it work. And I know other people are in good relationships with Japanese people, but it's really, really difficult. And statistically, the odds are against you for all those reasons. You know, for all those reasons, one of you's got to give up your family and your culture and your friends and everything and go live somewhere else. You know, your relationships are different. You've got to accept a lot of stuff. When I've talked about those things before, about the relationship thing, you know, not asking your partner where they've been till 5 in the morning and things like that. A lot of people have said in the comments, I couldn't deal with that. Or having your partner say to someone else that they think you're not cool. You know, some girl says, oh, your husband's really cool. And the wife comes back with, oh, no, he's not, he's annoying. You know, a lot of people just couldn't deal with that sort of, all the time. All the time. Or people coming to your door and asking for wife. Is wife here? Stuff like that, you know. If you're not cool with it, if you know, and forever, if you're gonna live here forever, you're gonna have that happening, all those things happening forever, and a lot of other stuff I haven't talked about. You know, you have to be Japanese, the lady said. You have to be Japanese, and that's really, they might not say that, but that's sort of the really undertone and a reasonable expectation, isn't it? We're living in Japan, so, you know, what's normal in Japan and what's not to say once you're in your own house with your door closed, things might change a little bit. You might be able to do things differently, but generally, you're living in Japan, you've got to accept what's normal here and what she thinks or what he thinks is normal here, because they're Japanese. They're Japanese living in Japan. What they think is normal is normal. And everybody they know thinks the way they think, usually. Usually, there's exceptions to this. But usually all their friends, you know, if I say 5 o'clock in the morning, where have you been? Who you been with? And she goes and tells her friends that, all her friends are going to agree with her that that's not cool at all. What's he doing that for? Right? Why does he want to hold your hand in public? That's weird. That's weird. What does he want to do that for? Right? All her friends and family would agree with her. That's weird. What a weirdo. Telling everybody what a great wife you are. What's going on with that? That's not cool. So they all agree with her. So anyway, it's a heads up video for our buddy that's moving here. Good luck to you, sir. I hope it goes well for you. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will, but I hope this video helps you. I hope that when these things come up here, you go, oh, I heard about this. She doesn't want to hold my hand in public. Okay, heard about that. All those things I just mentioned and more. Just remind yourself, if she does something that she didn't do in your country, she starts to say or do things differently here, just ask yourself if what she's doing is normal here. If it's normal here, it's not her fault, right? It's not her fault. If she's doing what's normal here, it's not her fault. You just got to be cool with it, right? So, just a heads up for you and anybody else that's watching that finds themselves in a relationship with a Japanese person. Heads up, guys. This is what you could expect. So, that was that. More videos coming soon.